Welcome back to part 9 of how to play Warhammer 40k 9th edition, the fight phase. In the last video we went over the charge phase. This time we will cover the interactions of the fight phase. Topics covered will include unit activation order, fight eligibility, and the fight activation sequence. Unit activation order in the fight phase is unique compared to all the phases covered thus far, and takes on much more of an alternate activation style of structure. First, units which have charged into engagement range this turn fight. Then after all charging units have fought, starting with the opposing player, players alternate selecting eligible units to execute the fight sequence, until no more eligible units remain, at which point the fight phase ends. Eligible units for fight activation are based on the following criteria. If the unit successfully charged this turn, units which did not charge are only eligible to fight if they are within engagement range with enemy models, and if it was not already activated to fight in this fight phase. So if for example the Slaanesh demons successfully charged two separate units this turn, one into this Redemptor and another into the squad of intercessors, in the subsequent fight phase all the Slaanesh demon units will be activated to fight before the Salamander's units because charging units fight first. Some units may have abilities which impact this activation order. In this case, the Salamanders do not, but all factions have access to the core stratagem, Counteroffensive. The fifth of the core stratagems, Counteroffensive, costs 2 command points. Used after an enemy unit has fought, you can select one of your own eligible units and fight with it next. Leveraging this stratagem will enable the Salamanders to not be so strong-armed in the Slaanesh player's fight phase, and, in its potential use, forces the Slaanesh player to determine which combat is more crucial. Once an eligible unit has been activated, it is taken through the fight activation sequence, which is comprised of a pile-in move, making close combat attacks, and a consolidate move. Let's go ahead and walk through this sequence with this unit of demonettes. This begins with the pile-in movement, which must adhere to the following criteria. Each model in the unit can move up to 3 inches and must finish its pile-in move closer to the closest enemy model. If a model is already touching an enemy model, it cannot move, but still counts as having piled in, and it must end the move in coherency. So when these demonettes perform their pile-ins, this demonette will move in a way to get the most of its 3-inch move, but ensuring it's still closer to the closest enemy before its pile-in, and the rest will follow suit, ensuring the unit remains in coherency. After the pile-in is complete, it is time to determine which models can fight. Models can fight if it's within engagement range of an enemy unit, that is 1 inch horizontal and 5 inches vertical, or if they are within a half inch of another model from their own unit, that is itself within a half inch of an enemy model. This may seem a little hard to discern, so I've prepared a breakdown using the magic of video editing. But you can use the same logic flow on the tabletop with the measuring tools present. First, let's look at the models within engagement range, and measure to find which models are within engagement range, that is 1 inch horizontal and 5 inches vertical. In doing so, we can determine that these 6 demonettes are within engagement range. Now time for the half-inch checks. Again, we measure to see which models are within a half inch of enemy models, and which models are within a half inch of them. And there we have it, we have determined which models can fight. The number of attacks a model makes in close combat is determined by their attack's characteristic. Looking at their datasheet, each demonette has 2 attacks, and their leader, the Allurus, has 3. Before any attacks are resolved, the targets of all attacks, and what weapons are being used for those attacks, must be declared. Valid targets can be determined based on the following criteria. If the attacking unit made a charge this turn, which this unit of demonettes did, it can only attack targets it declared a charge against, or units which performed a heroic intervention. And as mentioned previously, any models making attacks must be within the valid fight range to execute melee combat. If a model can make more than 1 attack, it can choose to split those attacks against different units, assuming they are valid targets. And in the same way, units comprised of multiple models can make their attacks at the same or different targets. In either case, like with splitting shooting attacks, resolve all attacks against one target before moving on to the next one. If there are no valid targets to select, then that unit cannot make any attacks, but can instead move on to consolidate. This situation may arise in the following scenario. Suppose these 2 Salamanders units charged this large column of demonettes. Naturally, they would fight first since they charged. So let's assume the intercessors make their attacks and clear out a whole bunch of demonettes. When the Slaanesh player elects to allocate attacks, they do so from the front. The intercessors then consolidate, and when it comes time to activate the Redemptor, it moves forward, piling in 3 inches, but is still outside of engagement range, so it cannot attack. Which brings us back to that rule. From this point, the Redemptor can choose to consolidate and end its fight activation. Attacks in the fight phase are done with melee weapons, identified by the melee designation under the weapon's type on their datasheet. And in keeping with how attacks are resolved in the shooting phase, if a weapon has more than one profile, you must choose which profile that attack will be using when it's declared. And all attacks made with weapons of the same profile must be resolved before resolving attacks with the next weapon. The core rules specify that if a unit does not have a dedicated melee weapon, or is unable to make attacks with their equipped weapons, then they are to make an attack with the following profile. Once everything is valid and declared, attacks are resolved following the same attack sequence we covered in Part 7. Hit rolls are made against the attacking model's weapon skill. Of those successes, wound rolls are made based on the attack's strength against the target's toughness. Of those successes, saving throws are rolled. The Demonette's Claws have bonus AP on wound rolls of 6s, so those attacks are going right through the Intercessor's armor. So only 2 saving throws can be made. Only 1 is saved, and of those failures, damage is inflicted, and models are removed. The Consolidation move follows the exact same execution flow as the Pylon move, only that it is done after the attacks are resolved. Being able to consolidate after fighting can help ensure that the attacked unit remains within engagement range and can rope in new units into engagement range as well, which as established previously will mitigate their shooting options and may put them into situations where the enemy will want to fall back when it comes time for their movement phase. Should that be the case, it may be worth considering the use of the 6th core stratagem. Cut them down. Costing 1 command point, it is used when an enemy unit falls back. Before they do so, roll a d6 for each model from your army within engagement range of the unit that is falling back. For each roll of 6, they suffer 1 mortal wound, which as covered previously, because mortal wounds cannot be saved, they can be extremely debilitating. Returning back to the example fight sequence, with the Demonette's activation complete, the next eligible unit is activated following the unit activation order of the fight phase. If no eligible units remain to be activated, proceed to the morale phase. And this brings the video on the fight phase to its end. In the next one we will reach the end of this journey and we'll be taking a look at the morale phase. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, give it a like. And if you want to help this channel grow, please subscribe. And with that, I'll hope to see you guys in the next one.